Okay. So I don't know. I hope that we're on at this moment. Okay. People are coming in, so we're just gonna give them a few minutes before we start. Hello, everyone. Okay. Okay, well, I think that we can at least say hello to the participants who are already here. So hello, everyone, and welcome to the last panel of this year's annual writing talks. I am Dr. Adina Arvatu, and I will be leading this panel. Before we get into the panel itself, I would just like to invite our audience to submit their questions in the chat. My colleague Theodora Soranian will help me keep an eye on your questions so that we can answer them at the end of the panel. Also, can I please ask the audience to keep your mics and cameras off at all points? This is just to minimize disruptions, feedback, noises, and things like that. So if you can take care with that, I would be very appreciative. Thank you. Now, I suggest that we get right into it, even though some participants are still joining us. To do so, let me just, good morning to you all. Let me just welcome you back if you've been attending our previous panels. So if you have been here before, you know sort of what to expect, what the format is going to be. But for those of you who are tuning in, let's say for the first time, the format that we're sort of trialing this year consists of panels with generally 4 speakers. The two speakers from the Writing Center program who can speak to the very many ways in which we try to create and support a culture of writing at NU and beyond. But also, in addition to those 2 faculty members, we always invite faculty member from the disciplines because they are partners in this effort of spreading the good word about writing and creating a strong writing culture. And last but not least, we always like to invite a student to participate on our panel because they too are our partners in this venture. So without much further ado, let me just introduce to you my guests today briefly. And then do know that after we each deliver a short presentation of about 15 minutes, we have reserved some time at the end for your questions. So we're eagerly awaiting your questions in the chat. We've been learning a lot about you and your interests from the previous questions that you addressed us during the previous panels. So keep them coming. Okay, so now, without further ado, let me start by introducing Dr. Bridget Goodman. She will be the first speaker after I basically set up the problem space, so to speak. Dr. Bridget Goodman is an associate professor of multilingual education in the Graduate School of Education at Nazarbayev University. Her research and teaching and supervision interests cover language education policies and practices in Eurasian countries, translanguaging as pedagogies, as pedagogy, and the acquisition of academic skills in across languages, basically. So very important in our context. So she's here today to actually share some results of her research into precisely this very last topic that I mentioned. After Bridget, we will have my colleague James Swider present about the way that we use genre pedagogies at the Writing Center in our tutorials and workshops. James previously is a writing instructor at the in the Writing Center program at NU. He's my colleague, and he's also the graduate support lead at the Writing Center. So he helps us basically tailor our approaches to the needs of graduate students. He taught previously at Tsinghua University. I hope I'm pronouncing it approximately right, in China. He will reminisce a little bit about that in his presentation. He taught composition and literature and creative writing there. His interests cover Writing Center pedagogy and rhetorical analysis, and he's also a PhD candidate at the moment. Congratulations on completing all the previous hurdles. He's a PhD candidate in semiotic and I'm sorry, Jim, can you help me here?
Applied Linguistics and Composition at Indiana University, Pennsylvania. Great program. If you're thinking about entering into it, I can help you with that.
Okay, good. Thank you. Thank you for that little bit of help there. Okay, so and after James, we will have Alain Ascar speak to his experience with writing instruction in a course that I will be presenting to you shortly. He is a PhD candidate in Eurasian Studies at Nazarbayev University. He has a master's degree in history from the European University in St. Petersburg. His research interests include Muslim intellectuals during the Russian Empire, and now the history of Soviet Kazakhstan, if I understand correctly. He's now doing his research on the Virgin Land campaign in Soviet Kazakhstan. Good. So this is the roster of our speakers. I will be starting us off. Just a few words about myself. I am, as I said, an instructor with the Writing Center program at Nazarbayev University. I teach writing and composition courses at both freshman and advanced levels, and I lead a writing seminar for PhD students in the Eurasian Studies program at Nazarbayev University that I'll be speaking about in a little bit. I have a PhD in philosophy from Monash University. I'm sorry, I'm blanking out on institution names today. From Monash University in Melbourne, Australia, and my research interests, unsurprisingly, are genre theories and pedagogies, and more generally, the construction of interdisciplinary knowledge. So this is who we are, and we are here today to talk to you about genre pedagogies and why they're useful in the classroom and how they actually sort of meet the needs of graduate writers and help us support that strong culture of writing that I was referencing at the beginning. So I would like to get us started with a short presentation about the seminar, the writing seminar that I have been leading since 2019 in the Eurasian Studies program. Alain will be able to speak to his experience from his end in that class later on. And just for a bit of background, I would say that the class that I'm describing, the course that I'm describing to you right now, is fairly unusual for students, but not just unusual for students in Kazakhstan. Let me explain why. It's unusual because students have to read a lot of theory, not just sort of practice some genres, okay? And that kind of goes against the expectation of getting on with the writing. Getting on with the writing is rather typical, is a typical expectation for in many graduate programs, and not just in Kazakhstan. Even in English-speaking countries, graduate students are somehow expected to absorb, if you want, to develop their writing skills in a tacit, implicit way, just by participating in the activities and practices of their disciplines. Now, what we've noticed is that immersion, we call it an immersion model, that immersion model is not as helpful as we thought it would be. It doesn't work as well as we need it to be. And this is how writing and composition studies as an interdisciplinary field was born. So this course, this writing seminar, the WCS 730, was designed to give students precisely, to make everything explicit rather, not to keep writing in that kind of shadow where students are just supposed to go away and do the writing and come back with the results, but rather make everything explicit. So to give students the vocabulary, the tools, the opportunity, and the space to develop and practice their writing skills through explicit exposure to genre theory and practice. So that's the first thing that is unusual about this class and special. The other thing that is very special about this class about this course is that it moves through cycles, as the title kind of suggests already. The title is From Genre to Style and Back. But that's not the only cycle that we go through. The course is set up as a seminar with workshops. So we discuss theoretical writings about genre, but then we have a workshop where we practice what we learned, and then we sort of reflect on how well that works, and then we return with the results of our reflection to the seminar part and question the theories themselves. So as you can see, there are many cycles that we go through, from theory to practice and back, from writing as a social activity to individual practices, and then back, from conventions and standards and expectations to student agency and back. Now, all of these cycles are powered by feedback and reflection. Basically, the assignment structure for the class consists of seven assignments, graded assignments. But in the very first instantiation of the course, there was an added level of difficulty to it, because most 5 out of 7 graded assignments went through a rough draft and revision cycle, so feedback and revision cycle, which resulted in a lot of writing for the students. And I bet it was, I know in point of fact, that it was fairly intense. I don't think that they expected it. Maybe Alain can speak to it, but from the feedback that I got at the end of the class, I think that students really didn't expect it, but they performed quite well. So now, how do I sort of set it up such that the genre pedagogies can help students in their actual career and with their actual writing needs. Well, I use a number of genre theories. We sample them, we read some, we also discuss a bit, and then we look at genres. And these genre theories and pedagogies that we're looking at are English for Academic Purposes, or EAP for short, for those of you who are interested in pursuing further, so that, you know, I'm giving you how they're known in the literature. The other major paradigm that we use is the rhetorical sociological genre theoretical paradigm. And in the background of it all, I draw on academic literacies, theoretical studies. What connects all of these is the fact that they move away from the deficit model in the second language acquisition. Now, as we've seen, research has become more and more international. So we cannot presume nowadays that research in English is only done by native speakers and writers of English. I myself am not a native writer and speaker of English. And the deficit model in second language acquisition assumes, in a sense, that students, non-native speakers of English should somehow be brought up to speed. There's some kind of an idea of remedying what they don't have yet. And the focus is a lot on this kind of instruction to get them up to speed linguistically. But as we know, academic writing is something that even native speakers have to learn. It's not, they weren't born with it. So we needed a different kind of approach for that. And genre pedagogies are that approach. Master approach, if you want, because research has been showing that genre pedagogies, in point of fact, boost or increase students' academic, rhetorical, and linguistic proficiencies and self-efficacy. And I've put up some references for you, and I would like you to know that the second study that I've included on my slide is a study that was conducted here in Kazakhstan, and Dr. Goodman can speak to it to us in her segment. Now, just to give you like a general sort of view of the genres that we look at in this course, we look at the main open genres that we look, open or public, genres that we look at are all research related, because PhD students have to be serious about research now. And these research related genres are research articles, abstracts, conference abstracts, and the dissertation as a very complex sort of or multi-genre that students need to write in for their degree. And in addition to that, they have to write in this course. They have to write in a few basic academic genres that can actually become tools as they progress in their own career, like genre analysis or response papers, and finally a craft paper. We can talk about the craft paper if you'd like at the end, because it's a departure, if you want, from expectations. It is, the craft paper is an academic genre that is used mostly in creative writing programs, but I'm going to leave it at that. And if you have questions about it, I would love to talk to you about it later. Now, very briefly, I just put up for you a sample topic, just to give you an idea of what we discuss first theoretically, and then get very serious about in the practical segment of the class, namely John Swales's so-called CARS model for research article introductions. this CARS, this is an abbreviation, an acronym for creating a research space. And I'm not going to go through it with you here. I'm happy to have a conversation with you later about the sort of details of it. But what I impress upon my students when we have the actual discussions and we read and discuss Swales and other sort of EAP authors like that, we emphasize the fact that this model for introductions basically describes, in a sense, their job as PhD students, as PhD writers, because PhD writers, like all researchers, they need to begin to show that they belong and that they can contribute to their chosen discipline or discourse community. And note also, I always draw my students' attention to the fact that the CARS model basically employs an ecological metaphor, right? It sort of makes us think of niche construction. What does that mean in simple terms? Well, if you know a little bit of biology and evolutionary theory, you know that according to niche construction theories, an organism doesn't just respond to stimuli and pressures from the environment, but they actually are active in transforming their environment in order to become fitter. So it's a bit of both ways. It's not just pressures from the outside that students have to respond to. They also have to sort of transform the very research environment that they find themselves in. Again, remember that the theme for today is genre and agency. And I think that genre pedagogies help precisely sort of illustrate in how many ways students, PhD writers, have a lot of agency when it comes to writing, and they're not just under the pressure of conventions or expectations. Okay, and here after, I know it's a very busy slide, but bear with me, the actual sample assignment is available to you on our website. So you can take a look at it at your leisure. Again, I'm not going to spend too much time on it right now. All I wanted to sort of say today about it is that this sample assignment that students do in 730, this is a genre analysis, and this is not your typical assignment outside of writing classes. It is based on EAP pedagogies, and what it involves is a deep analysis, basically, of a corpus of texts that belong to a genre, to figure out, to identify the social actions that the text performs or supports, the rhetorical moves that it makes, and finally the textual means whereby those all of those moves and actions are realized. This particular assignment builds on a previous similar assignment, a genre analysis of a research article that graduate students are very familiar with because they had worked with it during their MA. And that cycle, so this cycle of the assignment presupposes the previous cycle where they did a genre analysis of an RE, of a research article, they received feedback from me, and they went away and did the revisions and reflected on it. And now they are asked to basically apply what they learned in there to a dissertation. And the connection here is quite simply, dissertation is a research-related genre, and it has a lot to do with the structure of a research article too. So with all of this, what I'm trying to explain is that genre pedagogies are very, very useful because they allow students to focus not just on superficial textual elements. They all want to know, how do I write this thing? Okay, what words am I supposed to use jargon? Am I supposed to do this? So there's a lot of information about that on the website, on the wild web, if you want. But what you won't find on the web when you look up genres, let's say like a research article or something else, you won't find any kind of guidance as to when are you supposed to use certain conventions and when you have the freedom to actually, if you want, bend the rules a little bit or apply them differently, and why you would want to use some conventions but not others. So this is what our courses do. This is what we do in our courses. We basically give students guidance on precisely how do you decide in each case, what elements do you need to pay attention to? You need to pay attention to the practices, to the context, to the social actions that are behind a text that you have to write. You have to pay attention and ask yourself, what am I trying to do or accomplish with this? Where am I going with this? What purpose does it serve? And then to worry about, okay, the nuts and bolts of, do I say I or do I say we? Or do I just use passive voice all over the place? So, as I said, genre pedagogies are useful for that particular sort of holistic way of looking at writing. Genre is not just about how it's done, how a text is put together, but rather why it's put together that way. What are the social functions that it serves? And both are key to graduate writing. James is going to talk to us a little bit more about this sort of shift from the how to the why in writing center pedagogy and how we approach tutorials and workshops in this sense. All right, and this is just the final word basically that I wanted to leave you with about the 730 course. This is a piece of feedback. At the end of the course, I asked in 2019, I asked the first cohort to write me letters of feedback because I wrote them a lot of love letters during the semester. And at the end, I asked them to basically send me their feedback about their experiences in the class, quite outside of student evaluations and things like that. And this is a passage from one of the students' feedback. And I thought that it was a fantastic sort of expression of support, in a sense, for what we were doing, because the student shows that that intense class that they had to take, because it is a mandatory course that they have to take, it was relevant. It was relevant to their careers and helped them in with their academic progression. Those genres that we practiced, and one of those graded assignments that I was referencing at the beginning is a conference abstract that they're supposed to write based on their master's thesis and submit to a conference of their choice in their field. So this shows that the genres we've chosen have relevance for their careers and support their careers. It shows that students tend to appreciate explicit feedback and expectations. One thing that I forgot to mention, and maybe I will be excused if I go one slide back for a second, I would like just to point to this column, the sidebar in my task description. This is something that I came up with in that year, just because I felt that I needed to have a little bit of a informal conversation with my students on the task description and anticipate some of their, sort of questions, like scratch your head type of question. What do you mean by this? Or what is the purpose of this? So I do that with all the task descriptions. I encourage you to have that kind of conversation on the sidelines if you want, because it shows students that you're really having a conversation with them. So the final reason why I pulled this piece of feedback from the past is because the student at the very end sort of makes a reference to the craft paper as well, which is the kind of assignment where students are free to experiment with structure and conceits and so on. So I wanted this class to, the last word in that class to basically be agency for them. So yes, know the conventions and behave as a full member of your discourse community by adopting the standards and fulfilling the expectations, but do so as an autonomous agent. Make decisions, know why you're making, what the needs are, and then you will be just fine, okay? All right, so this is where my presentation ends, and I would like to sort of pass it on to Bridget, who was going to tell us more about what her research shows.
All right. Well, thank you, Adina and Carrie, for organizing this seminar and including me in it. As you heard, I'm Associate Professor of Multilingual Education at the Graduate School of Education. And although we are separate in some ways from the SSH Writing Center, we were actually the school was established as a separate legal entity in 2013 and only became part of Nazarbayev University in 2019. We do work in partnership because we see that we have very similar understandings of students' needs and approaches. And so, talking with each other about those approaches helps reinforce and support each other's work and hopefully help support your work going forward. So to explain a little bit about our school, first of all, we are a graduate school, so we only teach master's and PhD students. Like other schools in the university, we require fairly high English proficiency to enter the program, either IELTS 6.5 for master's or 7 for PhD programs. The exceptions are students who have studied in an English medium university before or who have lower scores but pass our foundation year program for master's students only. They come with varying levels of Russian and Kazakh, but also foreign languages, especially in the master's in multilingual education. We get philologists who have varying levels of French, Spanish, Korean, Turkish, as well as additional home languages. I mean, officially we are Kazakhstan's home to 130 nationalities and ethnic groups. So if we're lucky, we're able to get a student whose home language is Uzbek, but they're Kazakhstani, or who were born and raised in China, and so their home language is Mandarin, but who, for various reasons, returned, as they say, to Kazakhstan for secondary or higher education. And again, I say this to point out, as Adina said, we don't want to assume a deficit of a lack of English, but rather recognize that students come with very strong experiences in learning and using multiple languages and seeing these languages as resources. Our school, we're able to make our own curriculum. And so in the Graduate School of Education, all master's students get 2 full years of academic English courses and a semester of Kazakh language, which students are assigned to a Kazakh course based on a placement test. The PhD program in the past, it's been a semester of academic English. That has now expanded a bit to offer multiple writing courses, again, to support students, particularly, as Adina said, in the two most challenging academic writing courses, writing master's theses and dissertations. And believe me, as a native speaker, I wish I had access to courses like this. When I was a student at the University of Pennsylvania, only international students took a course on English for specific purposes, and now all students are required to take that course because of the recognition that all students, regardless of native language, need that kind of support for academic communication. As Adina said, our academic English instructors, and I'm not actually teaching academic English directly, although I supervise master's theses. I teach, therefore, a seminar on thesis writing. I've conducted other courses where I require specific genres, like preparing a conference poster, back in the before times when we could have conferences with posters. But our academic English instructor, and Philip Montgomery, or as I call him, Phil Nominal, was one of our academic English instructors who took a genre-based approach and described in his paper exactly the kind of deconstructing of a text that Adina described in her presentation. And also in our 2019 paper, we talk about, as Adina does in her presentation, about how we situate that approach in an academic literacies perspective, which, number one, recognizes that academic writing, it's a social process, that you're not just writing for the sake of writing. You're writing to communicate for a communicative purpose and for a communicative audience, and recognizing that purpose and communication style is situated. It can be situated in a country, it can be situated in a language, and it can be situated in a discipline. So the way you communicate for history or engineering or mathematics, and the way you communicate for undergraduate or graduate levels, and the way you communicate for a Kazakhstani audience or an international audience, or your classmates who all study the same topic, or interdisciplinary, right? These things are going to be different. We have another project and a paper under review right now where we're finding that what is considered genre knowledge in Kazakh is not the same for Russian or for English. So be mindful as we talk about these things that often we're talking about it from the perspective of academic English, but that it may not translate directly to the experience of writing or communicating in Kazakh or Russian or other languages. So what I'm going to present today are the results of a research study that my colleagues and I did on our own graduate school of education. And we took a mixed methods approach. So for the quantitative study, we designed a survey and asked all of our students and alumni from the first 3 years of our school, 4 years of our school, to tell us about their development of genre knowledge in 3 languages. So we had a number of criteria of what is genre knowledge, a number of items, and they had to tell us to what extent can you do this skill in English, in Russian, and Kazakh. We also asked them about the pedagogical supports, because we're trying to understand, what helps our students to develop this genre knowledge? What do they still need from us? So we also had, based on the literature and our instructors' experience, a list of different items of things that our professors and instructors do that students feel helps them develop these skills. We also conducted qualitative research. We conducted focus groups and interviews, right? So group interviews as well as individual interviews with students and alumni, mostly from the different master's programs. We had very few PhD students and very little participation in the surveys from PhD students. So we decided in the end to focus on master's students to try and better understand the answers we were getting from the survey, to contextualize our understanding. Because honestly, my background is ethnography, so I tend to be very qualitative. I've moved into mixed methods to answer new questions, but I still want that qualitative understanding so that I'm not making assumptions about what the data are saying. So what I will focus on in today's presentation, because honestly, this study, we had enough data for 4 different publications, so I can't cover all of the study results. But I'll focus briefly in today's presentation on 3 questions. Which pedagogical practices do students and alumni believe support academic skills development or genre knowledge? How do students transfer skills across languages in ways that suggest they have agency in producing genres? And here, we can use the term self-efficacy, that they feel they have this power to make choices regarding how they use these styles and how they communicate. And then finally, what are the next steps for research and teaching in this general area? So I'm going to highlight 3 pedagogical practices for writing skills development. Number 1, literally number 1, is explicit instructor feedback. So among our students who completed the survey, the 60 students who completed the survey, the mean rating, the average rating on a 5-point scale for this pedagogical support was 4.47. That's an incredibly high number. And it was the highest ranked pedagogical support. And this fits with our own experience. Our students complain if they get a paper and they get a grade and they don't get feedback. But also the feedback is what teaches students how to write. So here, Christian, a multilingual education student, says, I was told that I'm using the Russian style of writing because my introduction was about 20 sentences. I wanted to write everything in introduction and it wasn't right. And my instructor in academic English have told me that I have to change my mind and think about the topic statement and I should decrease the number of words. And again, we're not saying that that style is wrong. We're just saying that that style is appropriate in Russian, but for academic English, even in English, that could be a beautiful sentence. But for academic writing in English, it's less effective and less appropriate. But being told that directly helped Christian change how he approached his writing. Another important aspect is peer review. Now, this wasn't ranked as highly, but 3.79 on a 5-point scale is still pretty high. And I want to highlight the comments. This is from an alumna of the school education program, BOTA, and these are all fake names, by the way. These are pseudonyms. But we did it when we were working on thesis writing course, when we sent each other individual parts of the thesis. We read the whole thing that was sent to us and we tried to give advice not only in terms of grammar and such things, but also in terms of the parts that needed to be corrected as a researcher. So we found this statement to be very important because a lot of times when we think about writing and we think about feedback, we're only thinking about grammar. We're only thinking about individual sentence structure, which is definitely important. But it's also important to think more broadly and more holistically. And what this quote tells us is that this alumni started to understand that, started to see herself as a researcher, started to see her colleague, her classmates as fellow researchers, and oriented her feedback to that view. And I think we'll hear more about that from Alan when he talks about what it means to write as a historian. And then the third point, and again, you'll see this got rated very highly by our students, is the use of rubrics and models. So if you're not familiar with what a rubric looks like, I can show you one during the Q&A period. But essentially, a rubric is a special table with an outline of the different criteria for evaluating a text and descriptions of what makes it an excellent text, a very good text, a good text, a fair text, a poor text, or a failed text. If you've worked with IELTS. I believe IELTS has rubrics for evaluating writing. But again, I can show more specific examples in the end. So in this case, again, Bota is speaking. And actually what she's saying here is that she got very used to having rubrics in her academic English classes. And even in the content classes, I would often get a question, is there a rubric for this assignment? And I would have to create a rubric. But when the student went to the academic Kazakh course, which was not being taught from a genre-based perspective, she said her classmates said, well, where are the rubrics? Where are the samples? You know, we thought everyone teaches in this way, and they found it so useful that, again, they started, you know, using their agency to ask for these supports from other teachers in courses in other languages. Because knowing what the expectations are of who you're writing for is extremely helpful. And it's not only a skill that's needed for writing in a class. If you're submitting a paper to an international conference, I told students, look at every conference when they have a call for papers will also have a criteria for how that proposal will be evaluated. Submitting to an international peer-reviewed journal, also, the journals will have general criteria. And if you're a reviewer, they may have very general or very specific criteria for how these documents are evaluated. Individual professors will have different criteria. Some will emphasize whether or not you use commas. Some will emphasize whether you present the context or present comparisons across context. So being familiar with the expectations of your audience is important, and having rubrics and models that help illustrate that is very important. So now that we've looked at what supports the development of genre knowledge, we also wanted to know what are the outcomes of that? Because again, we're primarily teaching genre knowledge in English, but our university, and I think much of the country, has the expectation that students will be fluent and nuanced communicators across languages. So we may be teaching all of these skills in English, but our students still have to collect data in Russian and Kazakh. They have to write abstracts in 3 languages. They have to go to work in jobs in international companies or national companies where they may have to use these skills in not only English, but Russian and or Kazakh, or only Russian or only Kazakh. And so we asked a group of our alumni about these experiences, and what we learned 3 things. Number one, we learned that our students consciously apply styles of writing that they've learned in English to writing in Kazakh and Russian. And the one that comes up the most often is sticking to the point. So they're told constantly in English, you have to stick to the point. And one student said, oh, I used to write beautiful words in Russian, and now in Russian, I stick to the point. Or they learned in our courses how to organize a presentation. And so they use that same style or approach in Russian or Kazakh. And sometimes they get positive feedback. Sometimes their colleagues like the new presentation or new communication styles, and sometimes they get pushback. So we have another book chapter out where a student tried to write Navernia значит, it probably means. And the boss says, что такое наверное? Значит и всё. You know, why are you saying it probably means? Just say it means, and that's it. But they've learned in English that you can't say it so directly because you don't have the final answer. So, you know, the students have to learn to navigate these different approaches and decide whether to assert the new values they're learning in English or to step back and be more selective in how they apply these approaches. We have additional research that hasn't been published yet, and that was funded by a small grant in 6 universities. And one of the things we found is that students who report equally high proficiency in Russian and Kazakh also are more likely to report the ability to transfer skills among languages. So being able to transfer skills among languages is itself an indicator of high proficiency. And I feel this in myself as well, as again, as I'm going back and forth between English and Russian. The better my Russian is, the easier it is to move back and forth among the languages. But we still need more research on how to teach specific practices in Kazakh and Russian for specific genres, and more work to help students think through how to adapt and apply skills among the 3 languages. As I said, in our program, we teach English and we teach academic Kazakh because we recognize we're in a context where Kazakh has not historically been supported as a language of academic communication, where historically Russian has dominated. But there are also students who go into the workplace who need to know how to write a report in Russian, who need to know how to write an email in Russian. So we can't ignore Russian either. And with that, I say spasiba, rahmet, thank you, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you very much, Bridget. I think that we've learned a lot. I always learn so much just by talking to you, which just is one of those experiences. I always teach my students, look, writing is not just writing. Writing is talking to people, learning new things from people, getting a reality check on your assumptions and everything. So always a pleasure, always great to hear about your research. Thank you very much. We're going to move on to James now, who's going to talk to us about the Writing Center tutorials and workshops. Please, a reminder, put your questions in the chat and we'll get to them at the very end. Thank you. And take it away, James.
Thanks, Adina. Hi, everybody. Can you hear me well? Good. Okay. So my portion is called From the How to the Why, using genre in Writing Center tutorials and workshops. You may have seen me here. I work in the Writing Center. I also am in charge with program support for graduate students, especially within the Writing Center. So, but before all that, and before my PhD program, I worked at Tsinghua University in Beijing, China. Before that, I was a master's in English in creative writing, but I never really had explicit composition instruction about how to teach it. And so what I thought, and as a lot of so-called native English speakers of English thought, is that we kind of own the language. And so we are imparting our knowledge onto non-native English, so-called non-native English speakers of English. And so I was very directive and had very fixed ideas on how the English language should be. I would just say, this is just the way it is, so just do what I say. And I was unquestioned with this. To the students, this was the correct way of learning how to write. After I left Tsinghua, I entered into my current PhD program in composition applied linguistics. I started taking courses on composition, theories of composition, and I realized that I was completely misled, as a lot of other English instructors are, about what composition really is. For one aspect, I would have been criticized by Rosina Lippi-Green for promoting language ideology, meaning how language should be thought of, and suggesting that only native English speakers understood how English worked. So this operates under a very monolingual idea of how English works, is that monolinguals like myself only really understand their first language, and anyone approaching it is always in a deficit model. And so there will continuously be in a deficit even after they acquire many English language skills. I would have also been criticized by Suresh Kanagaraja for describing language as static when it is in fact dynamic and ever-changing. So this idea that language rules are fixed from some point long ago, and that's how they'll always be. When in fact, we fully understand that English has evolved over thousands of years, and it will continue to evolve, especially as different people groups come together. Um, with this, I also learned that there have been many different approaches to composition, each with their pros and cons. So Richard Fulkerson, back in 1979, identified 4 approaches to composition that have developed over the 20th century and even continue in the 21st century. What I was doing back at Tsinghua University is called the formalist method, which is good writing follows a strict adherence to form. And what that often means is that good writing follows good grammar. But we know from many studies is that teaching grammar, especially minute grammar rules, often does not have a good effect on both native and non-native speakers of English, in that they will just keep making the same issues over and over again. And also, I took a course on power and the multilingual writer, and this is sort of damaging, especially to multilingual speakers of English, in that they're sort of taught that they will never approach a native understanding of English, and it sort of diminishes their approach to writing. That's one approach. The other is an expressionist approach, which is the complete opposite, is that good writing is unrestricted and spontaneous. So somebody operating with this approach would give full freedom to the student and only step in if the student had no idea what to do. This can work for some types of writing, but oftentimes this leads the student to being confused and maybe adopting incorrect stances to writing in certain situations. We have a mimetic approach, which is good writing comes from good thinking, i.e. logic, whereas the writing process and adopting different thinking stances throughout the writing process is the most important part of writing instruction, i.e. developing critical thinking. And of course, that's valuable, but sometimes the student doesn't understand why they're doing what they're doing within the writing process. And so my favorite approach is the rhetorical one, which is that good writing addresses the needs of whoever the target audience is. And this is what I base my own composition philosophy on, because I think it balances the first 2 approaches and has critical thinking built right into it. Similar to this, we see different approaches to tutoring within the Writing Center. So a lot of people ask me, well, what is it that the Writing Center exactly does? And this has actually been a topic of debate within Writing Center pedagogy. Isabel Thompson identified that there's a dichotomy between directive forms of tutoring in which the tutor commands the student to follow them. In other words, the do this approach. And a totally non-directive approach in which the student has total power over their paper. So the tutor is there to motivate the writer, to bounce ideas off with, but ultimately says, it's your paper, you do what you want with it. And as we see with the composition approach, this sometimes leads to inappropriate outcomes with a fully directive approach and a fully non-directive approach. So what Thompson instead suggests is that we need to focus on scaffolding, in which the tutor explains what is most expected of this type of writing the student has, and leaves the student several options of what they can do to achieve the desired outcome. This sort of follows Lev Vygotsky's zone of proximal development, in which the tutor identifies where the student is in their understanding of writing and sort of tailors little lessons based on that. So some questions you might see with the scaffolding approach is that you might say, you will need to show you understand the discipline. What are some ways you think you can do this? Not sure, here's some of what I've seen. So in this approach, you sort of offer several options to the student, and then the student can explain why they would prefer one option over the other. So tailing back to genre, why do I consider genre a useful approach when tutoring within the Writing Center? So as has been stated before, an understanding of genre promotes genre as responses to demands of a discourse community. So as we've seen with Miller and Swales, but not only that, understanding genre allows you to adopt a social identity through the genre you're writing in. And what studies have shown is that doctors who learn how to write the patient doctor form learn to adopt appropriate stances towards their patients and sort of learn to think as a doctor. So the genre allows the doctor to understand what is considered important, and also how do I approach the patient? So what is my stance towards the patient? And so genres offer a powerful way for you to learn to step into your discourse community. And related to rhetoric, genres offer an introduction to rhetorical thinking as templates, but not intended to be carbon copies. So in our composition course, we have they say, I say, and we have different templates, but they're really just sort of introductions into thinking of why we make certain moves within an academic paper. And so through genres and therefore rhetoric, students acquire several threshold concepts of writing as identified by Adler, Kastler, and Wardle, such as metacognition, so thinking about why you're writing, writing as a social activity, and many others. So moving into praxis, or how this exactly looks in a tutorial, what are some common questions and statements I might make in a tutorial that's based in genre and rhetoric? So first and foremost, the obvious one is, what have you seen other theses and articles do that you are trying to do? Why don't we take a look? So if they have an archive of dissertation theses here, we might look at several dissertations that are in the same topic as what the student is doing. And I would say, okay, so what do you see in these different sections? How might this be useful for you to impart your own knowledge of this topic? Another thing I might say is, do you think it's clear for the audience when you write? That's especially useful for someone like me because I myself am a graduate student working on my own dissertation. So I'm part of a similar discourse community as the student I'm tutoring. So not only can I think as a tutor, I can also think as a graduate student who has dealt with my own professors. And so I can sort of predict what issues a professor might have with whatever they're writing. I might say that this is a good spot for you to explain the lack of research in order to justify your own. So that CARS model of where is the gap? So how do you justify your own research? Specific to genre, I might say, let's move your opinions to the discussion section so readers can first see the results, make their own conclusions, and then see what you have to say about it. So I would be trying to impart this genre knowledge of an IMRAD paper in which I explain different sections fulfill different needs at different times. So at one time, another researcher might just want to see what the raw data is. But at another time, they would like to see what your own opinions are. And so by separating it into these different components, the genre offers a useful way for other researchers to interpret your work. And I would point out what we call sort of localized issues like grammar misspellings, but I would try to move through the different concerns. So I would try to point out other things I'm concerned with that sort of violate the genre as a whole. Again, trying to show students that grammar, while it's important, is not the only thing that we need to focus on when we're writing within a specific genre. Along with tutoring, I also give several workshops. You might have been in one of them. This is an excerpt slide from my literature review workshop in which I explain APA citations. Under sort of a formalist approach, we might say that, oh, these are just different ways you can cite your work, but you need to do it in one of these correct ways. But during the workshop, I like to step back and I think, why exactly would we formulate these into these different types of citations? So I might say, if you want to emphasize who the researcher is for your audience, you would put the name as a part of the sentence. But when you're trying to demonstrate your knowledge of the field as a whole, you might synthesize your sources, and grouping them together in the parentheses at the end allows you to do that. The genre of an APA social science paper allows you these different options so that you can demonstrate what you want the audience to know when you want to do that. And so that's sort of a rhetorical and genre understanding that I would try to show during these workshops. So to close, I want to end with a quote from Stephen North, who wrote the seminal Writing Center paper, The Idea of a Writing Center, is that for people like me, a tutor, our job is to produce better writers, not better writing. And that at first seems confusing and a paradox, is that, well, what is the purpose of Writing Center if you don't write better? But it's really about thinking of where you are within your discourse community and how genres allow you to step into that community and become successful. And so if the goals of the modern university are to prepare students both for professional success and to critically engage with the modern world, the Writing Center can help in part by teaching students to understand and adopt the genres that control modern communication. And on that note, that ends my portion. Here are the references. Feel free to contact me if you would like to know more about Writing Center pedagogy and sort of my own understanding with composition. So thank you very much.
Thank you, James. That was very, very useful, precisely because you're actually giving our audience like a very concrete taste of what the tutorials look like, what the kind of conversation you might hear as you pop by or drop by one of our tutorials at the Writing Center. Thank you for that. With that, let's see if Alain feels like he became a better writer, maybe, because this
definitely.
this is a goal that we all share as writing instructors. Generally, the focus is not on how to make sure that there are no grammatical mistakes in what our students produce, but rather, are they better writers? Do they understand their role? Can they position themselves as writers? And so on. With this, I'm just gonna let Alain sort of take it away. Thank you, Alain.
Okay, thank you. I have never I only took the class on linguistics only once. And therefore, I decided to explain my topic through my personal experience rather than from theoretical. But I think it still would be interesting how all of this course, all of this topic is viewed from the perspective of the students, which I am. So briefly, my bio. I completed my BA undergrad degree at Nazarbayev University in 2016. Then I studied for 2 years at St. Petersburg University. And now I'm a PhD student in Eurasian Studies at Nazarbayev University. So I've taken this course from genre to style and back in 2019. And I think my style of thinking and writing changed dramatically. And I wanted to explain my change through the example of my dissertation. Well, I'm sorry, through my MA thesis. So I've wrote my thesis in 2018. The topic of it was the Muslims in the Russian Empire. So the problem, the content of my MA thesis was great. I really liked my sources. The sources were great. But unfortunately, the committee in Russia, in St. Petersburg, put me the good grade, not the excellent. And I was kind of in frustration. Why they put me not the excellent grade? Because my content was good. I had like followed the structure and etc. And those thoughts kind of bothered me until I've taken this course, to be honest. When suddenly I understood what I did wrong in my dissertation. And it also led me to think, how am I writing in general? It put me in the position of to reflect on my writing. And I realized that like my writing skills are really about, well, they are only about writing the essays, writing the book reviews, and making presentations. So that's all of this stuff are from my freshman year knowledge. And eventually my skills of writing basically did not change from my first year as an undergrad student. And this course showed me that I have to like expand my knowledge. I have to become more skilled writer. And also it forced me to think that that the text is more than just a number of sentences, number of paragraphs, and is just also the communication between the writer and the reader, and etc. And also the spoiler alert that I realized that my dissertation was written not as a dissertation, but it was written as a book or monograph, because during my writing of the dissertation of my MA thesis, I was constantly reading the books on my topic, and I unconsciously started copying the style of the writers who wrote those books, and it was one of the things that I understood from that. Well, regarding the structure, regarding my dissertation, I knew that structure about IMRAD format, about introduction, literature review, methods, results, discussion, even before that. But also what I realized during the course that all of my parts of it, introduction, body parts, methods, they're all written similarly. And if I'll kind of put one instead another, my text wouldn't change dramatically. And I started thinking about the text in terms of the structure, in terms of the figure. And now I think I should written my MA thesis as hourglass in a sense, in many respects, where I go from the general, and then in the middle of my text, I'll go very specific into the examples. And at the end, in my conclusion and discussion part, I'll kind of would be general again, where concluding my remarks and etc. The same problem with my paragraphs. My paragraphs were chaotic. In many respects, they were kind of the train with the several wagons, where whatever you put one position into another, change their kind of position, nothing would change dramatically. And it was chaotic. I understand now my professors who were checking my MA thesis, because it was difficult to read as I understood it. And during the course, we studied Hayot's method of putting the paragraphs that he calls uneven U format. And it was completely mind-blowing experience for me to write every sentence with a particular order, that every sentence, depending on its content, have to locate in a particular part of the paragraph. And I realized that you can write not as the historians do, from the specific to the general, but also from general to specific and then back to the general. And it was quite helpful for me. And now I prefer writing this method, but again, not always, but most of the time. The large portion of understanding of how I write walked through the exercises. Thank you for Professor Arvatu for the very extremely, I would say, even explicit assignments where she wrote what we do. And in one of our main assignments, the Gen Analysis 1, we analyzed particular research articles by different authors. And we analyzed the rhetorical moves there, whether this research article follows IMRAT format, how the author puts his contribution to the debate, and also it's important for the historians, the usage of the personal nouns, how often is author is using the personal nouns in the research article, and etc. Well, after this analysis was completed, I started reading another research article from the very same journal that is called Ab Imperia, which is one of the most popular historical journals in Russia. And I realized the next article, completely different article from the same journal, has a very similar structure. The usage of personal is almost on the same level. The rhetorical moves are also very similar. And I found out that this journal, the research articles in it, are very similar to each other. And it meant it was never told to me that the journal had their own standards. The journal had their own understanding of the genre of the research article. And in the future, I know that if I'm planning to publish something in the journal as Ab Imperio, I'll definitely will rely on that understanding of how other author writes in this journal. And I think it will help me to become better writer for them, at least. And I think in this way, becoming more integrated into the scientific community of the Ab Imperio journal. Okay. Another part of the class that I think it was extremely helpful were the in-class exercises, workshops, and assignments. It was like large portion of the assignments were regarding the exchange of the essays between each other, and we had 5 students, and we were from different disciplines. We had historians, anthropologists, sociologists, and political scientists. And constantly when we're exchanging each other essays, for me personally, it was kind of painful, because when I was reading their works, they were difficult to read, because the information that we're expecting to see was in a different part of the paragraph, in a different part of the introduction. And I realized that all of these disciplines write their essays, their research articles differently, not like historians probably. For example, I get used that the historians usually write from specific to the genre. They would start their introduction with an example already. It's kind of rhetorical moves, etc. And that, for example, historians do not use personal nouns, especially in the what's called Russian school. That instead of like seeing such sentences that will begin, in my opinion, or I argue that, they would say that this research articles would suggest that, and there is no personal present in many respects. That I got the sense that the research article was written by itself. I don't know. And I thought that, well, we have like research articles like Ab Imperia, who had their own formats. We have historians who have their own part and understanding of the genre and how to write research article. And what remains in between? And I came to a realization also through the course that there is always a place to stay in standards, the established way of writing. But also there is conventions that could be broken, or could be innovation that could be brought into your text. And in that respect, the writing of the text becomes more challenging, but in many respects also more interesting. In many respects, I started perceiving writing as a text not as giving a lot of information to the text and kind of linking, but also as a game with the reader. I started thinking about not also about the reader. Yeah, that's pretty much. Oh, in my concluding remarks about how how I think this course changed me from genre and style and back. I think I became not only better writer, but also better reader. Now I understand more how to read readings, different research articles, because it is also became easier for me to navigate throughout the readings, especially from different disciplines. I know that they write differently, and I now can focus on the particular parts of the readings that I think important, etc. But also I became a better writer. which is definitely. Now, in the process of thinking and planning, I not only thinking about what I will include in my research article or essay, but I at the same time already thinking where to put it in my essay, because previously I had lack of such planning skills. I also writing became easier and more challenging for me because I'm not only focused on the content that I deliver, but also in a debate which I'm entering. That I'm not only writing this to my professor, I'm also reading it to myself, but also to the bigger scientific and discourse community. And in many respects, it became easier because I have now purpose on writing. It's not just submitting to assignment to your professor and that's it. It's also, I mean, it's also about extra going out of class in many respects. And I also constantly think about what can I change from this like old formats, especially I read a lot of the materials in Russian from the Russian historians, and they sometimes it's boring to read them because they write very formally. And I think by introducing to this community with like something out of this formality, out of this structure, it also could be helpful for me. And yeah, but in general, it is true. I can assure you that, well, my writing skills become significantly better, that I'm no longer following this undergrad format where you have introduction, 3 parts of the body part, and then a conclusion. I'm no longer following this. I became more complex as a writer. I can now think of go out of these standards, go much more complex structure, but which will work. And yeah, and I'm very helpful for this course. I'm helpful for Professor Arvatu for that. And yeah, and thank you for your listening, for your attention. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Alan. Thank you very much. I should say, I think that I was the fortunate one. My students in that class are absolutely fantastic. And the interesting thing is that I always learn from them new things that I can do in the class, because I often forget, like, this kind of way of looking at writing has become second nature to me. And I keep forgetting that this is not how we start out. This is not how I started out personally as a writer. I told you I'm not a native speaker and writer of English, and I had to basically teach myself how to become a better writer. In time, my writing too has improved tremendously. But yes, a lot of these things I have to remind myself, and my students remind me all the time that it's a hard journey, and the more explicit instruction, the more explicit and clear we become about what we expect from writing, why we do that much writing, what are the purposes here, who are we trying to reach, and all of these essential questions. These are the very things that we should focus our instruction on, and the more explicit we are, the better, I think, for everybody. So thank you for listening to us. I'm not sure that we do we have any questions from the audience yet? I don't think we do. That is okay. In that case, I think that I have a few questions for our guests today. But before we get to that, I would like to let you know that after the Q&A, we're going to have Kawi Piczynski, the director of our Writing Center program, deliver some brief closing remarks. So stay tuned. Okay, so I would like to start us off with a very concrete question, which is going to be for James in this case. What do you do when students come to you at the Writing Center and all they want to do is talk about the grammar, or they want you to tell them what is wrong with their paper? How do you approach that?
Yeah, it's a great question. First, the tutorial is ultimately for the student, and it's sort of tailored to the student demands. Typically, when the student applies for the tutorial, they ask what they would like to focus on. If the student says they really want to focus on their grammar, then yes, I will take them in. I'm not going to forbid looking at these sentence level concerns. But what I would do, like I said before, is I would, while attending to the grammar, point out things outside of it. And I would say, do you really mean this when you actually mean this? Or why are all these ideas in this one paragraph? Because sometimes students literally, they do not have the language that we as composition instructors have when we're talking about assignments. So we come together, we develop rubrics. We have terms for describing what we look for in papers. And sometimes students literally do not have this language. They only know something about, oh, grammar is good for a paper, so therefore I should make sure my grammar is good. When in fact, they might mean something else, but they lack these terms. So of course, the tutorial is for the student, and I would attend to the concerns of the student, while at the same time, trying not to over dominate it by explaining why something would be considered incorrect and giving different options, but also seeing if I can attend to other things that may be more pressing concerns throughout the tutorial. And so that's sort of how I deal with this fix-it shop accusation that the Writing Center is only there for copy editing. And while we might do some of that, we actually can do a lot more. So that's how I'd answer that question.
Yeah, thank you, James. Yes, it is. We always have to be mindful that, we are having a conversation here with all our partners and what, are called stakeholders, because writing is a social activity. So we have to really listen before we can help. We've also gotten a question from the audience, from Robin. Thank you very much for it. The question is, does every faculty or college or school have a genre-focused PhD writing course similar to the one that I described to 730? I think that probably Carrie would be much better at answering this question than I am, Carrie Pieczynski, who's our director. But from my knowledge, no, we are only sort of delivering a handful of them for particular programs right now, but we are in constant conversation. We're constantly striking up new conversations with new professors and disciplines. And depending on their needs, we're always happy to design such courses tailored to their needs. Carrie, do you want to add something?
No, I think you covered that perfectly well. Thank you. We do teach genre structured course to PhD students in the biomedical sciences program in our School of Medicine. But other than that, Adina, it's all you.
Well, it is me and Heather, and it's all of us as we try to reach as many people as possible to actually sort of, this is what we're doing today too. We would like to reach out to everybody in the audience too, to start having conversations about such matters, important matters, how to turn our students into better writers. Okay. We got another question also from Robin. Thank you very much. So personal contacts / negotiations are important in expanding the service, right? Do you mean maybe, are you referring to Writing Center tutorials, Robin? What service are you referring to in this case? Have you, can you write in the chat?
What? Oh, discipline specific courses.
Discipline specific Yes. Oh, yes, I understand. Good question. Yes. The simple answer to that would be yes. Basically, we have, first of all, we have to listen really well and ask questions to understand what the program needs. Because as you heard from Alain, his big surprise in 730 was that he was sitting and working with sociologists and anthropologists and political scientists, and they had different ways of looking at things and speaking and writing and thinking. So we cannot assume, and we do not, in point of fact, we make an effort to convince people that writing is not a blanket term and it's not the same for everybody, and the challenges are many, and what unites us is this kind of approach to finding the best practices, the ones that support good writing in whatever discipline and given whatever needs you have. So basically this is, yes, you guessed correctly, or you anticipated correctly. This is our general approach, as far as I know, at least with respect to 730, this is how it happened. We needed to first learn about the program. It's a new program too. It's a very interesting program that they have, and very intense. I remember the first year of it. It was very, very intense. And I'm pretty sure Alain remembers it very well too.
Adina, if I may add something, the PhD courses are a little bit of a different animal. So what you're teaching, what Heather teaches in the School of Medicine. We do also teach courses to master's students. Within our school, we teach a science communication course to the natural sciences. And so that's also a mixed cohort across biology, chemistry, physics, and math. And then in the School of Engineering and Digital Sciences, we teach a very large course to the master's students there of technical communication. So those are, they're writing intensive. They're not only writing specific, but they do still have the same underlying approaches, genre approaches, rhetorical awareness, and so forth that you teach. But they're structured a bit differently from the type of course that Alain has just come out of with his experience. It was more towards writing for master's level work, and then also bits about conference presentation thrown in there as well.
Okay, well, I haven't seen any other questions in the chat. And I know that we've gone a little bit over time. I would love to continue this conversation, but I'm also mindful that it is a Saturday. So at this point, I think that unless there are more questions from the audience, I think that I will rest my case, our case that basically genre matters. And genre matters precisely because it's not all about what is expected of you, but it's basically about what can you do as a graduate writer. How do you position yourself? What is your sort of contribution, and how can you make it most effectively? So on that note, I will sort of hand it over to Carrie Pichinsky, our director, to basically deliver her closing remarks for the event. Thank you very, very much for your participation. Please continue to reach out to us. We're always keen to have more conversations about writing. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Adina and panelists. As my slides slowly load, I'd like to say that, first of all, I wanted to give thanks to the panelists who presented today, and also all of the panelists that have participated in the NU writing talks over this month of April, every Saturday. So I just want to take a few minutes to give due thanks. But also to kind of recap what we've done here for our first NU writing talks. Can you all see my slides? Yeah, okay. All right, so at the beginning of the symposium, our goal for this very first NU Writing Talks was to introduce ourselves as the Writing Center in the School of Sciences and Humanities here at Nazarbayev University. We wanted to introduce ourselves more broadly to our other colleagues across Kazakhstan and also international colleagues who are interested in the kinds of things that we're doing here, and give you a sense of what we do as a program. So we really did think about this first symposium as being a starting point. And so just to recap, if you'll forgive me for those of you who saw my opening remarks, I'm stealing one slide from the opening remarks that showed the various facets of our program and how it's all connected. And we didn't cover all of these today. We really focused on our curriculum. But with the idea that all of these facets are linked, and they're linked under the pedagogic principles that I hope all of you were able to see throughout the month of April in our presentations. So regardless of what we do, what aspect of our program we are working within, we all follow these same principles of emphasizing rhetorical awareness. So this is teaching that writing is done with a purpose to an audience within a context. So we want students to be able to recognize those elements of rhetorical awareness, to analyze it, to understand it, and to write with those in mind. This is core to everything we do across our courses, our writing support, etc. We also teach writing as a process. So this is multiple drafting. You could also put writing as a social process to pick up on Bridget's terminology there between those two, rhetorical awareness and writing as a process. So we are interested in supporting students through their pre-writing phase, of thinking about what they want to say, who they want to say it to, how they want to say it, and then taking them through multiple drafts. And our courses are structured to give weight to this process and to provide a lot of scaffolding and formative work, right, to link students up to the final end of producing something that is most often research generated, but not always, but revised in consultation with peers, in consultation with faculty. We favor a genre approach to teaching writing, which you got probably at its strongest today, since our entire panel was about this. Very much so within the courses that we teach for graduate students, but also for undergraduates. So the undergraduate courses are also very much focused on academic and in some cases professional genres. And we focus on the student experience. So when I originally put that in our opening slides, it was meant to provide an anchor for the rationale for why we change our program, how our program has been evolving and what drives those changes as we've developed. And it is based on student experience, student feedback, meeting student needs. But I will add to that the recognition again of our context, right? So we are an English medium institution. Our students are all multilingual. They're all learning English as an additional language, often one among many additional languages. And so we adapt the way in which we teach and support students in the Writing Center with that in mind. And so this is, our students help make us quite a unique program. Okay. That's my recap. Now I'm going to move into thanks, the many, many thanks. First of all, for our presenters, for all 4 of our panels this month. They are listed here in the order of their presentations. So just a brief reminder for those of you who were able to join us, and hopefully a little bit of a teaser for those of you who weren't. All of these presentations, the recorded versions of them will be available on our website, so you can go back and look at them. And we currently have a member of our organizing team working on subtitling all of our recorded presentations in both Kazakh and Russian. So as those become available, as those subtitled versions become available, those will also be posted on our website. I'd like to thank the symposium organizers. We've been meeting weekly for several months, a long time. And this is this particular symposium was organized from sort of a little particle of an idea. And so these voices have all contributed greatly into putting this together, framing our symposium, thinking about what this might look like in the future, also making it accessible. The symposium organizers include our departmental TA, our one department TA, Janar, who's doing all the translating and has translated the talking points that are available on our website, and will be doing the videos. And also Jana. So Jana is she serves as like a student intern, and she's the person who's pulled us into social media. So Jana's the one who's set us up, got us ready for Instagram, and has managed all the graphics. And she just she's applied her significant talents for communicating our symposium to the wider world. Okay. I also like to appreciate collaboration from some of the organizations that have put the word out on our behalf. So a couple of them, like the National Erasmus Plus Office and the Open Literary School of Almaty, we have working relationships with those organizations before we put the symposium together. And in fact, the idea for the symposium was born out of a webinar that we did for the National Erasmus Plus Office. And then also the Kazakhstan Teachers of English Association, KazTA, has been really fundamental in getting the word out to its membership within Kazakhstan, which is wonderful. Thank you very much. And the Go Viral Festival and Network as well. So these are people who are organizations who picked up our call and helped us spread the word about this month's events. That said, after our inaugural symposium, we would like to continue the conversation. So we plan to host this symposium every year. It will always be NU Writing Talks with a changing theme, and we would like to draw in other voices beyond NU. So we were very fortunate to be able to work with people from other schools, Bridget, and other departments, Dr. Victoria Thorstensen in the second panel. But we'd also like to engage other academics, other educators, other organizers who are interested in these questions about how to teach academic writing in English. So please feel free to reach out to us. And if you registered for this event in advance, I have your email now, so I'll be contacting you to offer invitations to collaborate with us in the future. You can find all of the information you need to know about us and the Writing Talks on our website. The link is provided here, right here. And if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to us at our Writing Talks email, which we'll continue to monitor. Okay. All right, so with that I would say my final thanks goes to the participants who joined us this month. Thank you for being part of our first NU Writing Talks Symposium, and we look forward to seeing you again next year. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for being here, and have a lovely Saturday.